talk. So now we're live. Welcome everyone to tonight. So we were just mentioning that maybe we can use the interfaces available at Azure to integrate the large language model ChatGPT ability to formulate answers, and that sort of leads into what you're going to talk about, Stephanie, what we do with the wiki, because there's no need to be very well articulate if you don't have any real quality on the data that you're going to talk about. So we will, once we do this or start to experiment with it, we will need to point it at the wiki to find reference, and from that possibly give more precise answers to the question at hand. But you can't shy away from hard facts, and hard facts is what we continuously fill the MDriven wiki with. Isn't that a fact, Stephanie?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So can you sort of enlighten us in how you go about and do your daily work?
Sure. Hi everyone, my name is Stephanie and I recently joined the MDriven team. So I like to read, write and edit, and that's mostly why I'm working on the wiki, because it's basically about creating a platform for everyone so that we can easily find the information we're looking for. And I'm here to work together with everyone, not just the team that's representing MDriven, but also with those who are using it, those who are interested in it, those who are already using the designer and all the software that MDriven has created so far. So the goal is to enhance and improve the wiki so that it's easy for people to find information, so that it's clear, it's easy to understand, and easy to access. Basically, if you have an idea, or if you have a solution that you need to find, or you have a question, the wiki is the place that we want you to go to, where you can access that information. If you're finding maybe that if you have an error in your work, or you're struggling with something and you're like, is there somebody else who has the same experience? You can go quickly to the wiki and search for what you need to find. And it's right there. It's very simple to find. Basically, I'm here to make life easier for everyone. And that means, of course, I'm very much interested in your suggestions, in your ideas or your opinions on what would make the experience much better for you as a person who's using MDriven, or if you want to recommend it to others, of course. I look forward to working with you, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah, good. So maybe
I
you,
think
Lars, should fill in.
Yeah, so I have been the first one starting to work with Stephanie on the improvement of the documentation task, because we are always going very fast building leading edge things, and then it might lack in explanation. So also we will divert any suggestions on missing topics from either the YouTube, the designer questions, and we'll try to feed them back into our team to give Stephanie the knowledge bulk to then present it in the wiki. So she's our content editor. And because we realize that even though we might know all these things and they just feels like they're hard-coded, they don't reach our customers the way it should should be. So she's going through every part of the wiki, and we're going through and building all the like OCL operators, providing better examples. And she's actually also using ChatGPT to some extent to find background information. So, but we're working from detail to the top. So the closer we get, I would say in autumn, we will then try to reshape the front pages of the wiki. Today they look the same, but rest assured that Stephanie has made thousands of edits the last few months, and she will continue on that path, and then eventually also go to interlinking the portal with the wiki, the designer with the wiki, and the wiki with the YouTube. And so there will be more easier and easier to find more detailed examples and work with that. And then, I mean, another facet of the how do I accelerate and feel more confident with MDriven is Hans's work with putting more and more things into GitHub and the examples and those things. So there is an ongoing effort really to shore up the availability of knowledge on how to use MDriven, because when we see new people coming in using our tools, you can see that they struggle mainly with finding examples and quick access to information, and it falls back onto them chat support, which is a kind of an inefficient way of doing it. So then, of course, if we can then have ChatGPT eat or ingest it, and then make it even more accessible. But so that's the backstory to Stephanie's new role in the company. So please help her to point out where we need to be better, and we will try to feed the wiki at a rapid pace for the coming year.
Yeah, and speaking of the OCL operators, there's everything is now categorized, or that's one of the parts of the work, to work with categorization of things. So so what is it? What we see here, the category OCL, and then we see all the pages that sort of is in this category, and the OCL operators as such, of course, should be interlinked from the designer. So when you're in the MDriven designer and the OCL editor, you should find a link there to sort of find the topic on the wiki. And this is not perfect, and we have some work to do. I think it's sort of depending on the parser, so I haven't figured this out yet, or haven't had time to go to it. But these kind of links, when it's incomplete, should of course take us to a page in the wiki where there's more information about this. But currently it doesn't show when everything is correctly filled in for some reason. So that's a bad behavior that we're gonna address. Good. Is there any other things? I know on the wiki that we are trying to catch the high level concepts, also that we trying to do pages for example, the obvious things for us, sort of class. Is that anything we can talk about now?
Yeah, I don't know if Stephanie wants to say, or I go ahead, and I'm the talker maybe. But yeah, so we're trying to create more inroads to find So if you search for class now, before it was like a given thing that you would need to know that. I think now you will find just the background story, and if you're a seasoned developer, this is obvious. But then we also link to some things that, like your explanation in video, Hans. So we're trying to create more and more inroads. The main work up until now have been to fill out a lot of operators, for example, also classifying them, interlinking them. But we have started, you could say, from the back of the book. So let's say if you see the wiki as a book, not a really great example because the point of the wiki is you can jump. But anyway, a book has a content, a start, and an index at the end. We have kind of started at the index level. So you will find if you go to OCL operators now, they're categorized in some way, but they're also categorized in the wiki categories. So I think you can go down there exactly, Hans. And then from there, you will now have much more ability to jump to like from the back of the index towards the details. So, so Stephanie has a big and important work, because you can, when you see all this, also you realize how wide span the whole tool has. It spans from all object-oriented programming to the UI to the full stack that we all are using all the time. Yeah, more details. What do you have anything else, Stephanie, that you feel like this is a thing that I?
Okay, I'll just add on and say that we are trying to build the wiki from the perspective of someone who is brand new to maybe software development, so that it's easier for them to understand and build maybe a model, or if they have an idea, how can they grow it? What steps would they take? What would they need to know? That's what we're trying to create here. Yeah.
Very good.
And I think I can, and the reason that we have that now, and then because you that are here that are more seasoned, you will maybe say, but I already know that. But but it's also about that if we only have the cutting edge things, like the last things that you hear on this video, then it will be very difficult maybe to connect that to the existing. So where is the inroads to that new advanced feature? What do I need to put in there? So it's we need to be all over. And as you said actually earlier in the meeting today, Stephanie, the more you edit, the more complicated it gets to keep track of all the different interconnecting things in the wiki. So the more you understand, the more complex it gets. So it's interesting to see this evolve. But to all others, please, if you have something that you think this should be better explained, send it through the support channel, and we'll try to explain it better, and it will get through. And then Stephanie in the end will see that we have proper English also, because that's one of her things, that we don't make bad language or incomplete explanations.
Lars, does it? How do we navigate to the wiki from the IDE?
Usually in the OCL editor, that's how I get there. I click on the links in the OCL operators.
Okay. I wonder if it would be good to have it in a modeling tool or something. Sorry, I was saying, I wonder if it'd be good to have it in the modeling tool and maybe a couple of other spots where it's easy to jump into it.
Yeah, so we have it sort of, okay, now it's really big. Some time ago we introduced this sort of wizard thing to enable easier access to multiple things. So when that's pressed, we get this, and this is the same if you're in Visual Studio or if you're in the MDriven Designer. So that works the same. And what this does is give you the sort of the main road to what is it that you want to do. I wanted to define information. Okay, do you want to add a class? And maybe you need to get some information on what a class is, of course, and you need to add it to a package, or need to add an attribute. If you already have a class, you can choose which one to work on, and if you need to add an attribute, this is the wiki, and you can always sort of go back to where it starts, and jump to the wiki to search yourself, but with rather simplistic methods. We have all the basic work covered to create your model with the point and click in this little wizard thing, and that's fully integrated into the modeling surface. And if you think it takes too much space, you just toggle it like that.
Damien, were you looking at a more clear inroads, like a search button on top, so you type here and press enter and it opens a wiki with the answer, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I just think a quick, I would think like if I could search for an operator or an object type, just to be able to, that's the world of modern software development, right? We never remember anything. So having a quick way to jump into an object structure, or how to declare something or whatever, that's how we develop software today.
Yeah. So
I haven't seen this. So in your defense, this is probably a good tool, and I haven't had a lot of need for it yet, but I can see that coming.
Yeah, of course, it's always like that with wizards, that you're only need them initially, and once you're sort of warm with the tool and up to speed, you kind of avoid them, but they are good to get back to basics, or if there's something you do seldom.
Maybe a lot of people don't even find the wiki. I don't know. In the help menu, the old style help menu, do we have a link there, Hans?
No.
So that might be at least something.
Yeah, I think we have it here, so we have it one step away.
Okay. Yeah, well, let's see.
Just one. May I have a few suggestions on the wiki? And if we are talking about the wiki as a documentation, it would be nice to have on the basic notions or in the UML diagram, like a little reference to third-party sources of the information that are more closer to the industry standards, sort of. So people not only source information from the wiki, but also may diverse it through, different articles, whatever you find interesting for your own self, if you edit wiki, but also as additional source of information. So it would be nice to have a little recommendations to read after, one of the articles that are talking about class, or talking about diagrams, or, in the UML school, for example, that we have. So that would be nice if you find some nice articles, or we will find some nice articles to reference to. We can just send you, and that would be nice to read on. So we can, this way we kind of improve the understanding of abstraction of the, the level of abstraction of what we are talking about all the time for the new software developers that are coming. So yeah, that would be nice.
Are you talking about putting into the wiki or on the diagram in the designer?
No, in the wiki, in the wiki, the articles as a additional.
Yeah, and when it comes to external sources, one obvious external source is when we end up in standard .NET operators for different things. Let's give you an example. If I do an attribute and have a derivation on that, if I come to another thing and do toString, that's a standard operator on system datetime, and when that shows up as a link, we discover that and jump to the Microsoft documentation on those operators. So that's good to know that we try to understand what's the best source for the documentation of this. So here, of course, we can find all the different formats that are allowed to use as a toString for this datetime.
I think we have, Stephanie and I at least, we have talked about adding external reference to external material in the wiki. If you have suggestions, you have found a great source of information, of course, please send it and we'll add it. Yeah.
Yeah, good.
I also wanted to add just to all this that we also have, and I was just looking at that, we have the analytics from what the different pages are most read, like where do a lot of our readers come from. So maybe for example, in the case of Damia and Daniel, like if you come across like even the user flow of how you go through the wiki, if you ever come across a flow that doesn't fit or it feels like it doesn't flow well, that you can also let us know, because that can also help us in how we structure it. And in the same way for us, I was just checking and we can see exactly where they land on the page, where they exit, where they spend most time. And I think maybe, Stephanie, this could be something that we looked into to see where, like you can see where are they going to from which page to which page and where are they leaving, because that might also help us see where we need to add more content. So just to add.
Yeah, and we that do have write access, and anyone that raises their hand can get write access, of course. But once you have write access, it's almost a daily task to once you find something and that's not connected to another thing that you also was interested in the same time, take 30 seconds or a minute to actually put in the link. It helps. It will help you the next time, and it will help a lot of others finding the next step, sort of. So linking is cheap and should be used heavily in a wiki. Good. Thank you for the presentation, Stephanie and Lars, and we will continue with the other point on the agenda, if there are no questions.
While we're at the topic of the wiki, is there some section concerning best practices? I mean, I've written fairly many OCL expressions in my days, but they tend to start with a class name .all instances arrow something, and I get the sense that that's not always the best way to go about things. Even decent people might get into habits that aren't really the best way to do things. I think that might be useful to more, intermediate level users like me.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and it's sort of we have talked about this in regards to the 1,000 Steps program. How do we teach, and how do one learn? And what the 1,000 Steps program is currently is grabbing anyone off the street and taking them by the hand and doing stuff. Once you have done a lot of stuff, you will have a grasp on what doing stuff entails and what the result is. So that's a way to learn. But you won't get any, so far with 1,000 steps, you won't really get any big discussion on how to think. Why do we do it like this? And I think that's the correct way to do it initially, just to take anyone by the hand and walk through it in a certain speed. But now, where the 1,000 steps are now at chapter whatever, the next chapter or the next coming chapter should probably do more of the things that you search for there, Daniel, to talk about the best practices on how to think in certain situations, even if that can be sort of the situations are, of course, there's no finite number of situations, but there's a certain reoccurring patterns that we probably definitely should cover and talk about why we do it and not just do it. So that's a good feedback.
And all instances, one of the remedies for starting at, you could say, the beginning with class.allinstances is the view model. You notice that after a while that the more you use the view model, the more you start with self dot something, because you have a more stable context. You don't need to have your expression starting from the beginning. Might sound a little weird, but actually you write a lot less OCL that is complex with the view model help. But you're not using view models really, right? In your
No, I'm writing a server. It's only machine to machine, so it only speaks web API. So
yeah.
I'm really just using the backend stuff, so to speak.
And starting with class all instances is there's nothing wrong with that if you're in OCL PS, so it's translated into SQL, because then it's the equivalent of select from table. So
yeah.
But of course sometimes even in OCL PS you have a context already. I want to know starting from this particular object or list of objects, I want to know more and link from that, and then you can of course start with self in OCL PS as well and send in the context.
Yeah.
Good. Speaking of that, I'm gonna switch to the other topic that we had on the agenda, and that's the beginning of Office 365 integration. That's a totally REST-based API, and with all REST-based API there's a certain flow, and the flow starts with some kind of authorization to get access to the API initially. Most, or not most, but many APIs are using auth flow, which sort of is first asking for presenting or rather asking a third party if I'm should have access. And if I should have access, I get a code back, and that code I can redeem for an access token. So what's the difference between a code and an access token? So the code is given by the provider of the authorization, and it's very short-lived. So if it gets in the wrong hands, there's not so much danger, because it has a finite lifespan. So that's the difference between a code and a password, so to speak. A password is long-lived, but a code is only valid for a few seconds. So what we need to do with the code is pretty quick to ask someone to give us a more long-lived token, and that's an access token. And the access token is also fairly short-lived. It's typically it lives an hour or so. So we're gonna get one of those and we're gonna save it, and possibly that's enough for the whole session, but you never know. All of a sudden it can expire, and the server is free to expire them any time they want. So we really need some kind of reoccurrence, some kind of flow here to get things working. And that's what I'm working on at the moment. I thought I would have something finished to show the whole flow, but there's been some complications that I'm struggling with to really figure this out myself, to the best way to do it with our existing things and a few new things. Basically what I do in this example, which is an example that lives in the MDriven components, the MDriven mergeable. So what that means is it's in the GitHub that's available for us, for anyone that goes to this new function to get access to the GitHub from within the MDriven designer or the MDriven framework. So here one would just refresh the file tree and get a new version of everything, and it will show up here once it's checked in and everything is working as it should. And the first step is actually to well, one has to read up on the API that one is supposed to talk to, and that when it comes to Microsoft it's always fairly clear, but when it comes to Microsoft it's also fairly a lot to read, and it's never super easy. There's always many details to take into account, and there's very seldom any short parts. It's only the most complex case all the time. So that can be daunting to get anything to work with them, because you have to know everything up front. But anyway, we can do it, so we shall try to do it. And one of the new operators that was introduced a couple of weeks ago, which is quite good for this kind of work, is the navigate URL. And of course we had the navigate from before, but that only navigates within the application. That works in the VPF application as well. It sort of changes the page for you. That's not something that we normally do with the navigate the self VM navigate. We sort of the best practice is to use the actions that very clearly declare which view model is the target, because then you get all this usage logic working much neater, and there's much more chance to do a static evaluation of what the application does. And if any view models aren't used at all, and if you can drop them, or if how that might be that they are not used. But the navigate URL is needed to navigate outside the application. If you want to tell the application go somewhere completely different. And in this case, we actually do want to go somewhere completely different. We want to go to login at microsoftonline.com. And there's a few alternative addresses for this. They all sort of lead to the same thing, and that's the portal where you authenticate yourself for Office 365. But of course, most have a tenant ID, which is the branding part of Microsoft Office, that you get a unique ID for your sort of Azure AD, Active Directory, and you need to look that up within Azure portal to have it. And of course, we need it to make this in different circumstances. We will need this tenant ID to help you to get things right. And the URL is built up like this, that we send it to auth 2 version 2, and we want to authorize. And who is it that we want to authorize? Well, then it comes back to the application that we have, and the application that we have must be registered with an application registry in the portal for Azure.com. So that's basically what you do, is to create an enterprise application, which is just a name. And on that name, you also get a client identity, which is a GUID that you need to send in whenever you are going to act as this application. So why must the Azure AD have an application? I've asked myself that many times, and the short answer is that it doesn't have to have one, but if we don't have one, okay, did everyone go? If we don't have one, there could be sort of security, and that just anyone could try to log in as us, and so this is an extended sort of security precaution that that you need to be very precise when you approach Microsoft auth version 2 authorize. You need to say, I'm this tenant, I'm this client, and the next line is, I want this code, and the code of course is something that I'm going to replace later or exchange set later for a access token. I also need to be very clear with the redirect URI, and the redirect is something that I also must explain on the Azure side, because only the redirects that I have declared on the portal, on the Azure portal for my specific application, will be allowed. As soon as anything of this mismatch, it will just say that I don't know anything. I will not give you any clue to make this easy for you. I will just play dumb and don't understand what you mean. And also we must send in how we want the result, and once we also must send in the scope, and scope is typically what will the application try to ask for. So scope, when it comes to the main source of information in Office 365, is the GraphApi, and the GraphApi is segmented into many things. One thing is sort of the exchange, so you can read emails and calendars and things. And another thing is SharePoint, or what they call lists. And so depending on what you aim to do, once you get to the GraphApi, you need to declare this here and send that into the request to get the code as well. And the final thing here is a thing called state, and state will tell us that's actually a nice thing, that it will just round trip this for us. So when it gets back, because that's the complexity of this. Once we go to this, send ourselves out to this authorize endpoint at Microsoft, depending on the current state of things, the most likely scenario is that it will present the user with a login prompt, a Microsoft login prompt. And that login prompt should be filled in with our Microsoft Office 365 credentials. If those are okay, it will go back to Office 365 and check, is there anywhere, if everything checks out and this is an authorized attempt or an authorized usage, it will send us it will answer our web page with this redirect address. So it will send back to the redirect address. Or I've always have a hard time how this works, but the browser is the client that does that sees this UI that Microsoft present, that you fill in the values to. And once you have filled in the values, your account identity and your password or whatever, and possibly answered 20 questions and filled in SMS codes and everything with the two-factor authentication, the last thing you do is push a button, and the Microsoft server comes to the conclusion that this is okay. This is a user that we're gonna let through. And when you press that button, the Microsoft server answers with not a web page of its own, but a redirect request. That is this redirect that we sent in from the start. So then we get back to our application. Now we get back to our application, but our application needs to do a lot of stuff, because we only get in this redirect, we also get a long code, this secret code, which is very short-lived. So what we want to do is to act on that code. And acting on that code, we actually did a new operator for in the account controller, or a new action to resolve this. So I'm going to show you how it looks. This is extremely theoretical, but how it becomes when you try to talk about these things, at least when I try to talk about them. So
I'm starting to get a nightmare. You know, this sounds like horribly complicated, Hans.
Yes.
I mean, this whole thing that you explained, wow.
So the redirect that we send in, what's the thing is that we added this Azure AD authorize, and we can actually set a breakpoint on that in our server, just to get a better understanding on what it is that happens. So this I'm not allowed to push this because I need to log in as a user in this system first. Why is that? Well, the reason for requiring a user to be logged in is that we actually want to store the access token and the refresh token from Office 365 on the sys user. So this is a pattern that we introduced, that we have these attributes. So that's why it's important to have it as a merge model. It should be easy to get this thing going once this merge model is done. So and in order to find a current user, we need to have the whole sys-singleton current user pattern, but that's sort of standard for everyone that using Turnkey to get things to run smoothly. So heading back to the application, I'm going to log in as user A 1 2 3 4 5 6, and then I'm going to go to this page, and pushing this button is actually doing this operation, self VM navigate URL. So what happens is that this will send our application on its merry way to Microsoft, and then things will take on from there. So let's see. And that, yeah, let's see if I can see you at the same time. I'm gonna ignore that for now and see if I can do it again, but now turning on F12, clearing here, and preserve log, and setting this on network. So when I click here, I can see that the action was caught in by our client and sent up to our server, and then we called whoa, did I sort them? I didn't mean to sort. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna do it again. Yeah, sorry. Gonna resize this. Well, I'm not allowed to resize it. Okay. So what happened was that we got a... No, this isn't right. It has only cleared the log, so never mind. But we got this back, and we ended up in our new action in the, which is part of the new turnkey builds will be, and we get this long code back, and we got this state back which says where we're gonna go after this, because we do a redirect to this state. And what we need to do when we get this code is to the challenges when I'm doing debugging and having Camtasia to catch the screen. F10 is stop recording, and so I'm gonna refrain from pressing F10. I'm gonna press F8. Yeah. Okay. Well, this didn't turn out to be a perfect way to show things. Never mind about the details. What happens is that we get the access token filled in for us. So if I just next experiment, clear this access token, so I don't have one, and then send this authentication request again. F11, and once I do a lot of subsequent requests, receive posts from Microsoft with the details, get the JSON back, I try to resolve the JSON back and set it into these properties, Office 365 access token. I'm gonna run here. And then we have the access token that we got back from this JSON that we got from a totally separate call. So there's lots of calls going back and forth, and the aim with all of this is to make it easier for anyone to integrate with Office 365 in a few view model columns and not needing to know about all this stuff. That's why I'm telling you now, so you don't ever have to think about it again.
Just a curious thing, Hans. How wide is this Office 365 authorization like thing going? Does that mean like basically all Microsoft login stuff? So can you even call Azure for Azure services?
Yes, I think everything they are sort of pouring everything into GraphApi, and you can do administrative things with Azure via GraphApi as well. And one of the things for enterprises is that you can introduce your own services and expose them via GraphApi as well. So once you do your own service architecture, you can and have those on Azure, you can easily make those available via the same authentication mechanism as the one we use here. So it's
you set up a turnkey server and then you expose services and they become part of the company's catalog of services on Azure.
Yeah, you could go that way, and then you could do another turnkey system to consume all the company's services this same way. And of course, what's access to also the new stuff with the AI things. So I saw that they exposed an API for DALL-E to do image rendering from text, etc. So it's quite wide, so it's important that we get this to work in a smooth way to get access to this. This is the scope that I currently set: user read and sites read all. So now I have an access token. Now I can ask about me with a simple let's see, where did we go? So this button, me Office 365. So what this does is a REST GET to graph Microsoft version 1 me. That's an operator, and then I send in it's a bearer token, and then I send in the current user's access token, and that's it. If I execute that, I get data like this back, so saying that details about me in this directory, which I'm accessing now, which is the directory of Perigo. So that means I can also do a sort of a search in the SharePoint database. Let's see what I searched for, because I hard-coded this search to actually just no, I was in the wrong place. Search. it calls graph Microsoft.com search query, and again bearer token, and calls the search nesting with the details about the search. And here we must say that this is string content and it's application JSON, and the string content is need to read up at Microsoft on how to formulate searches, but this one will search on water. So this is a query for the SharePoint's farm to search for water in all the documents. And if I execute that, I get a lot of hits back, and this is pure JSON, and I can use the other tools to sort of break this up. And one of the aims to for doing anything of this is to, at least for the SharePoint integration over GraphApi, is that we get a drive identity, this one, for the document back, and so we get an ID and a drive ID, and this is the same sort of architecture that OneDrives use. So SharePoint and OneDrive on your Windows machine are sort of the same thing. And the good thing about the drive ID, or the identity within the drive ID, if you move a file around within the same drive, it will keep its identity. So this means for SharePoint that we can allow users to restructure their site and move documents all over the place, and we will still have an exact access to this document as long as they are on the same drive. So that means that we can save a reference to this document within our application, and to have access to a document even after the user has moved it and cleaned it and edited it and checked it in 1,000 times and then moved it again. And this is a good thing, because what we have found is a very common use case is to have detailed metadata in about things in a system like MDriven based system with a detailed model, but then access to these more traditional documents like drawings or images or stuff that someone wrote 100 years ago, policies. So then you can have sort of access to policies from within just a specific metadata object. So for example, if you're doing a bookkeeping system and you have invoices as metadata in MDriven, you still might not want to keep the PDF of the printed of the rendered invoice in your database. You might want to keep that in SharePoint for reference, or the purchase order or anything like that. So that's really good to be sure to have a document handling system on one side and a metadata system on the other side, and be sure that they can integrate really good. So we're sort of over time, but the thing that we need to solve, and it's not fully solved yet, but it will be, is whenever I do a search here, I'm not sure that this access token might have expired. So if this has expired, the search call will fail. And if the search call will fail, I probably don't want to expose that to the user, that, oh, the search call failed, please log in again. Probably I just want to have this logic log in again and try the search call once more. and this has turned out to be a bit of a challenge in the current situation. But this is something that I'm currently working on that we need to solve. The solution looks something like us introducing as an action on the nesting side, that if this call didn't end in success, then do something. And what is it that we're going to do? Well, this is the problem, because what we're going to do is actually potentially taking us away from the site, ends up at Microsoft multi-authentication if the session has expired altogether, or if we've been forced out from an admin. And then we need to do all this flow again to get back and do the exact same action as we started with. And I'm not quite sure on how the solution is going to look, but it's going to be beautiful, I can assure you. So, and that's where we are right now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking, just when you said that something goes wrong, I don't know if this will lead down the wrong path, but for server-side actions, we have this on exception thing that can be called, and that's a general kind of issue we have sometimes, that a view model fail and we don't have a good way to recover from it.
Yeah, so this is slightly a different problem, because this is an asynchronous, and the browser will be forced to navigate away from the application, and then it will be forced back into scope, and once it's forced back into scope, it should know why it was forced back into scope and what the state is at that point. That's generally not a problem for us, we probably can do it, but we need to find a good way to do it. So that's the challenge. It's the perfect solution would be to introduce sort of state machines for view models, to better track all the different situations on the different things that we need to adhere to. And I think that would be a good that's a good thing to think about, but it's a bigger bigger thing. So we're going to wrap things up here. Sorry for being late, but thank you for tonight, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good evening. Bye.
Bye.